You know, there's something I've noticed about New Super Mario Bros. U. Like, it tries to be quirky with its little quick save feature, where if you quick save, leave the game, come back again, your quick save disappears. So now if you leave the game without saving, you don't go back to your quick save, because it's gone. But instead you go back to the last time you actually chose to save at like a castle or tower. Nintendo, it's New Super Mario Bros. U. You don't need... This is why the Wii U failed. I'm done. I'm done! Okay, on one hand, I kid a little bit. I mean, sure, this way of saving is a bit complicated for Italian Plumber Jump Game on Wii U, but we are still very lucky to have saving in our modern games. Here, let's compare Mario U to the original Super Mario Bros. 1. Look, final level. Let's just turn this off and back on, and you've gotta be kidding me. Get it out of my sight! Saving in video games. This is a topic I see many people take for granted. They just don't talk about it enough. Like, at my funeral, I don't want to see people say, "Oh, he was a great guy." No, please talk about how you don't have to restart Crash 2 every time you play it. I think to fully understand how much of a godsend it is that we can save our games now, we gotta go back. Or just appreciate it now without listening to me talk about the history of saving games. That's fine, whatever. When home console video games actually began to arise in the 1970s, saving wasn't really needed. The big appeal of most of these games were that they were arcade games in the home. It was revolutionary. Okay. Anyways, because a lot of these early games were arcade-like experiences, saving just isn't the kind of thing those games need. Even if they aren't exactly arcade games ported over, for most games you're meant to turn on the system, play them for a round or two, trying to beat your high score, and then turn them back off. Although, technically the first video game that saved something was the Atari 2600 version of Space Invaders. It only saved your high score, which was helpful, I guess, and was sort of a flex on Atari's part, but for the other home arcade games that couldn't save those scores, it doesn't matter. It was not a big deal in the slightest. Anyways, as the years went on, video games began to severely increase in scale, best shown with Super Mario Bros. Releasing on the NES in 1985. This took the idea of video games just being small, bite-sized pieces of entertainment to a sort of experience that no one had really ever had before. The thing with Mario 1 is that the game has 32 levels, again, a bigger game than anything that came before it. And while gamers nowadays can 100% this game in like less than 40 minutes at the slowest, people back then didn't know all the secrets and best ways to go about beating the game. So, these 32 levels felt way longer and grander than they do now. And as a result, this is the first video game that I think would somewhat benefit from being able to save. However, I don't think it's really required. The game is still fairly short, and plus you can go back to the start of the world you got a game over on, as long as you don't reset the console. So if you were really desperate to beat the game, you could just leave the TV on all night and you could play again. But this begs the question, if saving would benefit Super Mario Bros. No matter how necessary it is, why not just include it? Well, for those who don't know, allowing a game to save isn't as simple as just letting it save. Inside the cartridge, you need to add a save battery, which is actually able to remember the info it needs to, well, save the game. However, due to the fact that no other game had really done this yet, and the fact that adding in a save battery would increase the manufacturing price of the cartridge for Nintendo, I think it's fair that they passed on this. However, that increase in manufacturing price makes it all the more impressive that the next year, Nintendo released The Legend of Zelda in Japan, which included a save battery. This was extremely innovative for the time, and when it came over to North America just a year after, it was still innovative. Like, what do you want from me? And well, yes, it was innovative. It was definitely necessary for a game like Zelda. I mean, Mario was a new adventure-like type game, but Zelda took that in a different direction, resulting in a less linear experience, with more variables to take into account. Thus, Nintendo included saving in the game so you could feasibly complete your quest. And then they decided to make you blow up a bunch of random walls with no hints towards them whatsoever. I think that's kind of counterintuitive, but sure. Anyways, now that saving seemed a bit less extreme of an idea, you'd think that more games would include it. Yeah, no, man. Yeah, throughout the 80s, saving was still a very rare thing for a game to include, which was scary because games were still getting bigger in scale. Games like Mario 2 and Punch-Out kinda go into the same boat as Mario 1, where they would extremely benefit from the ability to save, but the lack of it is still barely passable. But in 1988 in Japan, Super Mario Bros. 3 released. Do I really have to say any more? Yeah, to be honest, Mario 3's lack of saving is sort of frustrating to me. Yeah, it adds to the game's difficulty when playing on the original NES version, but this game takes multiple hours for me to complete, especially when going for 100%. I mean, back in the day, you only had a few options at all in terms of beating the game. You could either, again, leave on the game all night, use the warp whistles, which most people did not know how to get any of them at the time, or continuously improve at every world individually and keep restarting the game, getting further and further each time, which isn't super easy. I don't know, I just feel like a game as big as Mario 3, which came to the States 3 years after Zelda 1 did, should have gotten a save battery. However, I have my theory for why there isn't one. And it's not just, oh, the price of making the carts would go up, because obviously that explanation is lame and garbage and is entirely disproven by Zelda 1. Basically, the reason Mario 3 took 2 years to release stateside after Japan's release was because the video game industry was having a really bad chip shortage at the time. If Nintendo had shipped out the stock of Mario 3 they could have made at that point in 1988, there is no way that would have met the giant demand for Mario 3 over here. So I think a possible reason for this lack of saving is that in this chip shortage, manufacturers were already having a pretty rough time making the game, so I don't think they would have wanted to add a save battery in every single copy of the cartridge. That would just be too extreme for the situation they would be in. Anyways, it doesn't really matter the exact reason they didn't include saves. I'm still here 35 years later complaining about it. However, there is still one form of saving I haven't mentioned yet, and that's because... Ew. Passwords. These things are usually given to you after you complete a level or die in a game. And then, back on the title screen, you can enter that password given to you, and it will use that to send you back to where you were given the password. Okay, I will admit passwords are a pretty nice way of getting around using save batteries. So much so that I'm surprised Mario 3 didn't use passwords, like after you beat each world or something. But hey, maybe they just didn't want these ugly pieces of trash in their game. Trust me when I say that passwords can get really bad. Like in a game like Mario's Missing, the passwords are like 6 digits because it's a smaller game, but for something like Metroid, oh my god, 24 digits is a bit much. I mean, I get a game like Metroid has a lot of specific things to save in a password, but I'm still here 35 years later complaining about it. Anyways, with the 16-bit generation now coming in at full force, passwords were getting more and more popular, because games were also getting bigger, but still couldn't shell out the cash to produce save batteries. On one hand, I don't like passwords because, well, you gotta enter them every single time you play a game again, which is a bit inconvenient. I'm sure writing them by hand was annoying back in the day as well. Like, if someone random saw this... I mean, now it's just easy to take pictures of them, so it's not that bad, but still. However, on the other hand, I do like passwords because they prevent one of, if not the biggest problem with save batteries. Aging. Okay, let's first break down how a save battery actually works. There's 2 parts, the actual lithium battery and the SRAM chip that actually stores the data. Basically, whenever the console is turned off, the lithium battery in the cartridge continuously pumps in a bit of power into the SRAM chip to allow it to continue to store the memory it needs to save your game. The problem with this is that continuous energy the lithium battery pours in does not last forever. Every day, these batteries run out of energy more and more, and we're to the point where these 30 to 40 year old cartridges that we collect aren't always gonna save. I specifically have a few examples, like my copy of Super Mario World. It sometimes saves my progress, but when I turn it on, it sometimes deletes them. It's weird. That battery is holding on for dear life. Also, my Japanese copy of Donkey Kong 94 just stopped saving entirely. I think Game Boy games might be prone to this more than other consoles for whatever reason. Like, my copy of Super Mario Bros. Deluxe does the same thing as the Mario World copy, but hey, maybe I just got unlucky when it came to Game Boy games. Anyways, there are ways to replace these batteries, but they do require some skill in soldering, which doesn't look like I know how to do that. Most of the time, I'm likely just gonna buy a new copy of the game, which isn't a great idea because the battery on that will eventually run out as well. Or spend who knows how much for some other person to repair it for me. However, passwords completely ignore this aging issue because, I mean, what do you want me to say here? There's not really any physical explanation involved here. It's all in the chip of the cartridge, my friend. So, yeah, both of these have their pros and cons, and it made sense that passwords and save batteries could coexist for a while. It is important to mention, though, that because 16-bit games saw lots more RPGs emerge, those games usually did use save batteries because the amount of password digits you need for an RPG my god. However, this peace found in the saving world didn't last long, because video game companies began to do actually smart things. Yeah, in the late 90s, most companies switched over to using CDs to create games, specifically with the Sega CD add-on in Saturn and Sony's new PlayStation. Alright, let me show you something. You can unscrew a cartridge and see the space it has for a save battery, right? Where are the screws? Unfortunately, the switch to CDs sort of eliminated the choice of using save batteries because there was nowhere to physically put them. Plus, CDs are only meant for set data and not for storing new data, so companies had to find different ways to store this data. Okay, let's see here. You can't store the data in the game now. Oh. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. You see, earlier consoles technically didn't store data in the console themselves, at least not yet. The Sega CD add-on did have a bit of storage space in the console, but when you ran out, you had to use a memory card. Memory cards were the ways companies store data for the near future now, and okay, technically the Sega CD used an extra card that could be inserted for more RAM instead of the traditional memory card, but it's the same concept. Basically, memory cards could be plugged into your system, and they are what physically stored your data. They came in all different shapes and sizes and from different companies and had actual different amounts of storage space, usually measured in blocks, as they like to be called. Okay, I get this simplifies the storage terms because I don't think a lot of people knew what a megabyte was in 1995, but still, blocks isn't much more helpful. When you started a new game with a memory card inserted, the game reserves a certain amount of storage it wants to use in your card, and this data can usually be deleted at any given time as well. But if you don't have a memory card, you usually could not save any data until you got one. Actually, when I first bought a GameCube with Luigi's Mansion, I forgot to get a memory card with it, so I kinda just played the intro to Luigi's Mansion for like a week until it finally shipped to my house. Anyways, memory cards were used for around the same amount of time for each company's consoles, with Sony using them for the PS1 and 2, Microsoft with the OG Xbox and 360, and Nintendo with just the GameCube because, again, the fools. Oh, and for all you Dreamcast fans out there, yes, the Dreamcast used memory cards. Praise the Lord! Okay, the reason these companies phased out of memory cards is because the console technology actually advanced well enough as to where save data could be stored on the system now, like I said earlier. And when you ran out of space on your console, some consoles supported micro SD cards, some used USB storage expansion, and the PS3 actually used both, with earlier models having SD card slots with later models ditching them. This also leads to weird situations where the Wii still has memory card slots because it supports GameCube games, and that's the only way you can bring over your old save data from the GameCube. So now in the present day, Sony and Microsoft's consoles both use USB expansion compatibility if you run out of storage, which will happen because digital games are taking over the world now. I swear to God, one day I'm gonna be walking and around the corner I'll see a digital game ready to kill me. But there's no way that's true because there's no physical state they can take form of because they're digital. Haha! Also, I do want to quickly mention that this form of storage is not exclusive to just CD-based consoles. All of Nintendo's handhelds use cartridges but still save data onto the system. Specifically on the Switch is not saving on the cartridge helpful because that means whatever copy of the game you have, your data will be stored in your Switch account, not the cartridge. Also, all of Nintendo's handhelds since the DS Lite also use SD cards instead of USB drives, likely because of better portability. I mean, I wouldn't want a USB drive sticking out of my handheld console everywhere I go. Now, with the Nintendo Switch 2, they force you to use microSD express cards, so my old microSD cards don't work on it, which is annoying, but I guess it helps the console read the SD card data faster. I mean, what can you do about it, am I right? To sum this all up, saving is something I feel like we take for granted these days. I mean, yeah, it's not like it's a person we aren't appreciating or anything. Not respecting saving your game doesn't hurt anyone, but I just think it's so interesting how we got to this point. I think it's super important that games save nowadays. I mean, look at how big these games are truly getting. Plus, with modern hardware, we can now save in retro games we never would have saved in before. Because usually in ports of older games, suspend points are included, which lets you save your old game whenever you want, and you can load it back up again. The question of is this fair or not arises there though. I don't really want to get much into that, but for people who don't really care about that authenticity, it's a great addition. Well, okay, I did it. I went from the history of saving in video games, from Space Invaders on Atari, to whatever the heck this is. That's my charity deed done for the day. Now that I've informed everyone on this topic, let's see what people say at my funeral!